artificial intelligence has really changed the game for us. Unfortunately, we structured our system right from the outset to utilize AI. I think there was a study in 21 where I think it was 92%, if I'm correct, of the managers said that the systems they were using were not built for frontline staff. What we wanted to do was to solve the major pain points, not just go and digitize paper, and AI made all of that possible for us.
Welcome to the Health Automated podcast, where we discuss what is going on in the world of social care, technology, and AI. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm delighted to be joined here today by Jack White. Jack, how are you?
I'm great, thank you, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Been a busy week, but yeah, I can't complain.
I know that feeling, but it's nice that we're actually starting to see some sunlight as well, so it makes the days not as long, although they seem longer.
No, it is good. I was driving home the other day at 6 o'clock thinking, oh, actually, it'll be quite nice just to be able to sit outside or go for a walk as opposed to getting in and feeling like you need to wrap up warm and go to bed.
Oh, it's just miserable in the winter. I'm not a winter lover. How about you, Devan? We haven't introduced you yet. Do you like winter or summer?
Oh, no. I grew up in South Africa, so the winters there are like the summers here. I am not a winter person.
I'm not a winter person. I'm sorry. We'll quickly let you introduce yourself, Devan. Sorry, I've asked you a question beforehand.
Absolutely fine. So, Devan Moodley, CEO and founder of Health Connect.
Lovely. So, do you want to tell us a bit about Health Connect, Devan?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So, Health Connect is an AI-driven care intelligence platform, which is very different from the other systems that are out there in terms of its use of artificial intelligence to aggregate data and to utilize predictive analytics and compliance analytics and compliance completion as well.
Nice. Sounds like a very comprehensive system, Devan.
It is indeed, and I think the challenge for us, Jack, was looking at what were the pain points that we needed to solve, and putting ourselves into the position of the managers in particular, who are the ones that are burdened with the compliance issues and having to collate all of the data and what we figured was that from our experiences, and we've done a lot of turnaround projects before starting this, and had phenomenal results with taking organizations and facilities that had inadequate ratings, notices of proposals to actually outstanding ratings. But we wanted to do it at scale because there's only so much you could do when you're doing all of the turnaround stuff. It's far too limited. So it was utilizing that original blueprint, which is very manual, to then build a system that would be able to automate absolutely everything. And that's what we've been working on over the last couple of years. Artificial intelligence has really changed the game for us. Unfortunately, we structured our system right from the outset to utilize AI and developed our own closed source AI, which was quite a complex challenge. It's become easier over time. And that's the crux of what we do. The key thing that we found was, there isn't a lack of care; it's a lack of the systems. And you have great carers, great people leaving the profession because of all of the administrative burdens that crop up all of the time. So our approach is very different. And what we wanted to do was to solve the major pain points, not just go and digitize paper, and AI made all of that possible for us.
Excellent. So would you say that's your journey into Health Connect then? So because I believe you're medical practice beforehand, aren't you? So is that what you would say was your turning point, trying to make that change on a greater humanity scale?
Absolutely. And I don't actually see it as having left clinical practice. It's just trying to solve the problem from a different angle. But yeah, that was a motivation. The motivation was to solve these problems and to try and do it at scale. We can elevate the level of care throughout the country, but you need proper solutions for it. Tech is the answer, and AI is proving invaluable in terms of doing that right now.
Agreed. There's a saying, isn't there? Modern problems require modern solutions, and I think we use what we call a look-back approach, don't we, when it comes to social care? It's how my ancestors done this beforehand, and then I'll follow the pattern. And I think it's been like that for the past millennia. Mark, you've got experience working in social care for many years. Do you feel that that's a bit of a trend, like the look-back approach instead of look forward?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, Devan, you touched on it earlier, actually, managers are so time poor that actually I think sometimes it's really hard to have that strategic look ahead because you're just in that day-to-day thick of it all the time, chasing your own tail. I think there will be managers, you spoke about kind of the admin time, the burnout, people leaving. There will be managers that are looking for roles in tech. And I just wondered, you've obviously made that jump across. What advice would you give anybody that is currently in a management role, whether they're working, frontline operationally or in a strategic role, that wants to get into kind of the world of tech? Obviously, not expecting everybody to be going out and founding a business like you have, but if they wanted to kind of dip their toe in, so to speak.
Education. I think the first part is learning. Everyone you speak to these days has got an opinion about artificial intelligence, don't they? And it's about learning. And learning has become, it's going to be a lifelong thing now for us, the way the world has changed. And we're so early on. And that's the beauty of it. So for managers and clinicians, and specifically managers, they have the experience, they've got the expertise, they've got the knowledge. As I said, caring isn't the problem. And it is translating that into technological solutions. They are key to solving this problem. They know what the problems are on a day-to-day basis. And the majority of them, I think there was a study in 21 where I think it was 92%, if I'm correct, of the managers said that the systems they were using were not built for frontline staff. They know what's required within systems. They know how to make life easier. They know why, 30% turnover in the sector. What is it that's causing that burnout? What is it that would result in people wanting to stay in the sector? And so it's tapping into that knowledge and utilizing our managers, because humans have to be in the loop. That's what we've built. And those are the best people to go to in order to develop these systems.
I agree. I mean, using the approach from a frontline worker perspective, a lot of these registered managers are highly skilled at what they do, but unfortunately, I feel they're set up to fail in a lot of ways. I mean, it's the only sector I know where you get 5 people's roles in one and expect that bang for buck as well. And especially when we spoke about this last week on the podcast, and a lot of the registered managers start their career with the outline of, I'm going to do great, I'm going to make a difference, I may wish to progress up the ladder at some point, but I want to be hands-on and caring for someone. And then over time, as they promote, more responsibilities get added on, and a lot of this is outside of the individual skill set. I'm a registered manager, I'm not a payroll expert, I'm not a HR, and having a lot of systems that can automate a lot of these processes will stop a lot of that sector-wide burnout. We see a lot of fatigue from registered managers from the cumbersome tasks they need to do, the tireless submissions. And I agree 100%. AI is the next gen springboard that's going to take a lot of this away from people and allow them to get some of their life back. We emphasize a heavy work-life balance, but we don't have it. We really don't have it. I know I don't at the moment. But that's the thing, isn't it? AI at the moment, it's in that primacy where over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be a mainstay. And people will say, why didn't we have AI sooner? And once that comes along, the sector's desensitized to it, it's moving in the right way, it'll become an everyday norm. And we'll look at people who don't use AI like, whoa, back in the Stone Age, are we? So to speak. And we have to be real with the workforce as well. I've grown up in tech. I was born in 1990, so I'm not really old, but I'm not really young either. But I would say that's probably the last sort of decade where you had that break from technology coming in to being able to be what I would call an ordinary child. So I'd go out and play, but then I'd come in and use tech as well. But the tech I would use was limited for its time, like trying to use dial-up broadband. So it wasn't perfect. And if I used the internet, my mum would tell me to get offline so she could ring my nan. So there was all of these idiosyncrasies that go into it, right? And but looking at the modern worker, they've grown up with tech. We're trying to attract younger people into the workforce. Naturally, we've got churn with age. And to bring people who don't use, who are used to using tech, into a sector that doesn't, will cause a massive churn straight away. It's like stepping back in time. And someone said the other day, it's like going back into a Victorian workshop when they left one provider to another, because they went from one that was completely digitalized into one that was back into a paper-based way, going through a transition. And they said it was like about 20 years behind in the ways of working. And AI will replace this. AI will make a baseline that everyone springboards from.
No, absolutely. And I don't know what your experience of this is, but there's a disjoint between the decision makers and the frontline staff, and in terms of what the requirements are from an exec level, as opposed to what we need right on the ground. And I mean, the point you made is absolutely brilliant in terms of demographics are changing. You have a different group of people on the front line who are going to be more accustomed to it, and who we have not provided for. The digital literacy thing is becoming less of an issue because, and Jack, you're young enough, have been brought up on tech, like unlike the rest of the people within the sector. But how do you bridge that gap? Because what you have, and it's, I think the problem is more complicated, because what people want at a management level from a system is actually very different from what's required on the front line. And it's even worse now, because what you have is a younger generation and those people at the front line being brought up with AI as opposed to just tech. Yeah, everyone's using GPT, and it's still in its infancy. And then what we have is the decision makers that are not as au fait with the systems and have different needs.
Agree.
No,
I mean, sorry, Mark.
No, go on.
I was going to say, at Health Automate, this is one of the problems we found. But every customer has their own idea of how they should run their business and what's required. And trying to tailor a solution to meet the needs of approximately 30 to 50,000 SMEs is not viable. And there needs to be some form of standardization. And we see a lot of this at local level, not so much digital system level, where one local authority will have a way of working and policies and procedures completely different to their county, the next adjoining county. And where you've got providers who work across too, they look for systems that are dynamic. So as you were saying, it needs to meet that structure, that flow, and how they operate. But what is that flow? And it's trying to understand the needs of every single business, because a small business should in theory run a lot easier than an enterprise level customer. But enterprise level customers tend to have a lot of processes and workforce in place to bridge the gaps that the SMEs struggle with. And this is trying to find that striking balance. And AI, although it's great, everyone once again has a different perception of an AI, and what it should do. You got some people who say, oh, it's good for text to speech. And then you've got other people who completely expect it to automate their business so they can spend 6 months a year on a beach, not having to do anything. And that would be the dream. That's what we're building up to one day, maybe. But it's all about bringing it back and allowing that personalized care. And this is one of the key challenges that we face as a sector, not as a tech provider, but just in general. finding the time to provide hands-on care and then striking that balance with the data input that comes alongside it, because they are both essential parts of care delivery, making sure documentation, compliance, and all of that's there. And some of the feedback you hear, I'm not sure if you've heard the same, Devan, I'm not sure if you've heard the same, Mark. Some of the workforce turn around and say, I feel I spend more time using a device than I do delivering personal care. Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the use of multiple systems is part of the problem. I think the average for those that are using tech, it's 4 to 7 systems. And there was a piece of work done which said managers in particular spend probably about 5 to 7 hours just switching between the different systems. So it's taking away that time from managers. Got an impossible job, right? I mean, if you look at each of the domains and each of the subdomains and hundreds of thousands of data points that you've got to collate, which nobody does, not even the regulator, because it's an impossible task that's been created. But again, that's a system issue because you can automate that. You can actually analyze all of that data. But the problem is that we have digitized paper to an extent. We have a lot of tick boxing going on, right? And it is about covering your back a lot of the time, no matter what you say. Is it really person-centered or is it fear-centered? If it, everyone gets told, if it haven't documented, it hasn't happened. And we've gotten into that. Mark, your past experience, you'd have seen a lot of this, I'm presuming, and that's what takes away the time. So it's about liberating. It's liberation, isn't it? We need systems that are going to allow us to give back the time to our managers and our frontline staff. And the systems that we have don't do that at this point in time. You can automate so much, and the process stuff that you spoke about, Jack, that is critical, and that's one of the problems. And I'm not going to talk about what our system does, but that process mapping needs to be done utilizing AI, because forget local authority. You got a care home group. From care home to care home, their processes are different. As much as you try to standardize it, the individual managers have got a different process in place. And in many respects, that works. That's a diversity. That's the richness of everything that we do and produce as results. But that's where AI can come in, because you can look at that entire process map and you can optimize it. You don't, standardization is a huge problem, but I think it's about optimizing those process maps in order to produce standardized outputs, as opposed to standardizing the processes. That's a much, much bigger challenge in my view. And I'm not certain how far you'll get with trying to do that, because of and quite correctly, the differences of opinion in terms of what's needed from processes points of view to get particular types of outcomes.
I agree. It's very disjointed. And through this journey, we've heard many times, what makes you different? How are you going to change a broken system? The system's too big for you to tackle. All of these hurdles. And where you've got blockers, it goes to show that there's people that don't want to remove that block. Because a lot of these processes, it's like tax laws. The government moan about it, but they could close the loopholes like that overnight if they really wanted to. But it's to who's benefiting and why. And one of the biggest concerns I hear is job losses. The more we automate the processes all the way up through government level with policy, discharging, over the years that equates to thousands and thousands of perceived job losses. Now, I'm not sure if you remember when the self-service checkouts came in about a few years ago, and there was massive upheaval. It's losing jobs. Actually, you need 2 people to run that one checkout now. So you do still need to repurpose the workforce. And I think the fear is a lot of people have this perception that AI is going to come in, it's going to replace them, it's going to replace what they do. And because let's just say I'm a training coordinator, if I've got a system that can look at training stats and notify people for me and do a lot of that role, my job's at threat. It is at risk, potentially, if a company's looking for a cutback and they can automate. And this is where I think there's a lot of people sitting on the fence, because you've got some people that go, it'll make my life easier. But then you've got some people say, it won't make my life easier, because now I've got to retrain, I've got to reskill, I've got to adapt potentially into a new role. I've got to coexist, if you will, alongside technology. And I think there's a lot of these fear factors that on the subconscious level go into individuals. I mean, if you was to go into work and let's just say production line workers on cars years ago. The first time an automated robot on a production line was brought onto, you can imagine the look of a lot of them workers that were like, hold on, something I've trained my whole life for is now going 24/7, doesn't need pay, just needs a bit of TLC every now and then and monitoring in the right direction. So what we'll see is an increase in productivity, but then will businesses expect their workforce to be as productive as the AI that's producing them outputs? And I love AI. I'm all over tech, as you can imagine, like you do, all over it. And the error reduction, once it's set and configured properly, it is astounding. It can look constantly at variables. It can look at, thresholds, tolerance levels, whatever you wish to address, and it can notify you immediately. So you're no longer waiting a month to find out if meds weren't given on the 13th of this time. You're instantly aware and can be more reactionary and reactive to the events at hand and potentially stop it spiraling. So from a safety point, it's great. But now I'm an auditor who works in an office. That's my role. Do you see where I'm going with it? And these are some of the objections when you speak to not the business owners, but the general workforce. So one of the key sector challenges that we see is digital champions, getting the buy-in from staff members, getting your digital leaders within your organization, which is fantastic. You need people to have that tech buy-in. But realistically, if I was in any other industry and that was my task, I'd get months and months to make that decision. I'd get a budget, I'd get market research time, I'd be a competent person with digital tech. Maybe I would have had to have had some underpinning technical know-how. And a lot of it, I feel, is a confidence issue, because no one wants to put their name to a project that's going to fail. The same as no one wants to take that ultimate accountability for purchasing a system that goes wrong. And we've probably all heard of companies saying, we regret our choice for this, we regret our choice for that, we're now locked in. And it causes a bit of animosity. And I'm not sure if you've noticed this through your ventures, but we've seen it a few times. And off the back of that, I feel that we're never going to tackle all of these challenges until people start seeing action and seeing the positives. But there's also going to be negative experiences that need to be effectively managed as well. AI won't get it right 100% of the time, but there's also got to be accountability to the inputting of the data and who is responsible for doing that to get that function. And I think a lot of it is just training and education, but there's so many pardon my words there. There's so many different, shall we say, various data sources that sometimes give conflicting information. And where you've got one local authority that will say, do this, then you've got another local authority that will say, don't do that. And then you've got a regulator that sits on the fence saying, we welcome innovation, but we're not going to give you any guidance on how you implement that or take any accountability for it. It just leaves people chasing their tail until someone moves from one area. And where we're seeing more alignment with the NHS standards, once again, we don't operate in the NHS, we operate in social care.
Yeah.
So to try and move across to meet NHS standards, once again, is a scary feat, because businesses are seeing changes in 4 or 5 different ways, whether that's funding, recruitment, all of that stuff that comes in. Then they've got the digital side. They've actually got about 4 or 5 verticals going on at the same time that they're trying to effectively manage. And systems like you're saying, Devan, like Health Connect, can help tie in a lot of them processes, and help people get on the right foot to manage them verticals. But realistically, my gut feeling says I don't feel there's going to be any major changes for the next 5 years. And I feel that's just because, based on previous, how long it takes the sector to adapt and change to a lot through regulation.
Unless you come up with something that's category defining. I'm not going to go into spiel about the stuff that we do. That's coming out in June. But as I said, if you look at let's look at the compliance problem, okay? And even the regulator acknowledges to a degree that it's an impossible problem to solve, which is why they only sample a sample of the data. Okay, what you can do, which is what we're doing, is sampling every single piece of data. That's hundreds of thousands of data points within minutes, with unbelievable accuracy. Now you take away that burden and that headache from everyone. That's just one pain point, right? But that is such a huge pain point. Impossible problem to solve, or that's what's been perceived. And that's where you start. You start by doing that. Coming back to your point about the fear, this is the thing, Jack, Mark. We talk about taking away jobs, right? Mark, you probably know the statistics around this better than I do. But there's something like over 100,000 vacancies, isn't there, within the sector? Okay, so what jobs, right? You've got those vacancies there at the moment. The auditor that we were talking about, you have a system like this, you have a system like Health Connect, which does your audits automatically, right? That means you can actually go and act on it. It's going to make your job better. It's going to improve care. There's no doubt about it. It's taking away the manual work that everyone hates, right? I mean, who wants to sit there and go and audit? And you can't even do it accurately and effectively over a large number of patients. But by removing those headaches, what you're doing is allowing them to go and do the job that they were meant to do in the first place. You provide...
This is where the vacancy side comes in, though, and it's a bit misleading because it says social care vacancies, but it doesn't actually break them down into roles like coordinator, managers, frontline caregivers. And a lot of the tasks that we're looking at automating aren't for the frontline carer. They're more to do with the back-end staff in the office. So the frontline carer will go out and do their data input into a system, but it's mainly going to be the office teams that are dealing with all of that. Now, statistically, it would help if we had the data of how many office roles versus how many caregiver roles are vacant around the country. Do you see what I mean? Because when we're looking at the caregivers, we're looking at those that are going into people's homes or working in a residential based service providing that care. Now, I don't know many care providers that are struggling with office staff. It's always the frontline caregiver. So we say we'll free up their jobs to allow them to do more frontline care, but realistically it's probably not in that person's role for what we're automating anyway. For instance, if we're automating finances and compliance, that's normally not a caregiver who's dealing with that role. So it's how we try and make these positive impacts through the company, through their time savings, as you're saying, like the efficiency savings, and how they repurpose it. And this is where I think some of that scare factor does come in, because I've met many coordinators over the time who are a coordinator by trade, but then when they're short staffed, they will go out and deliver hands-on care. So for that person, would their role now change from a coordinator to a carer? Because if they've got AI that's planning, rostering, doing their maps, the company's got to say, well, you've still got 30 hours this week. What are we going to do with you for them 30 hours? And so essentially you may lose people through that way, through natural changes to their job role description with the implementation of tech, you know. And I feel that sometimes the statistics on this are quite misleading, because how many people does social care employ? It's over 1 million people, isn't it? I think close to
1.8 million, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest employing sectors in the country, but actually only a proportion of them are caregivers, if that makes sense. And this is where the stats are a little bit, in my opinion, and it's always hard to balance where we're at. I agree, being reactive and being able to see live data, especially when it comes to things like forecasting, planning, budgeting, amazing, because the government has a 3-year look back period where it goes, how much did we spend over this year, that year, and that year, and we'll work out an average going forward. For the government to see real-time vacancies, you know, real time, how many people are employed in Leeds, you know, versus how many vacancies, allows them to be smarter with that budget allocation now. So instead of going to counties where they don't have as big a problems as maybe underfunded counties, they can now look at their national budgets and say, well, actually, Yorkshire is struggling with recruitment, so we can take some extra money and put it there, and be more live with the budgets and more flexible. But it's a very difficult one, because you get stats from all different places. And I'm sure, Mark, as you probably see a lot of these coming in when you get ones from your local authority, you know, and all that sort of stuff. And some of them are conflicting. And it's like, what one do we have to go with here? And you're right, when you say no one can ever get auditing 100% perfect, that also adds to that problem, makes it a bit more of a quagmire. And I feel, in my honest opinion, that's why I say 5 years, I feel, is what we would say is the acceptance curve, because we've already sort of a few years into the AI cycle, slowly dripping in, people are starting to use it. But I feel more about, we need to emphasize there's job stability and where people are at now and where they may be in the next 5 to 10 years with tech, and what their role could look like in 5 to 10 years working alongside intelligent systems. And I feel that that would be a good campaign, because that's telling people your job is safe in social care in the future. It's a future-proof career. But you've just got to have to potentially change your way of working, like when we started using email instead of mail, and word processors instead of typewriters. So it's just trying to soften the blow, and making a lot of people feel that they won't be replaced is one of the biggest hang-ups we see.
I think being I'm going to say pragmatic on this point. Your earlier point around the repurposing, I think those are spot on. And if what you are doing can be automated, it's going to be automated. Right? That is the reality, the way in which AI is going. So there are roles that are at risk. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And whether it's at government level or whether it's in the private sector, if you can automate that role, you will automate that role. That is going to happen. And so I think with the advent of AI, it is considering those roles and looking at people on those roles. And there is a huge education piece to be done around this. And but being transparent about it. There's no way we can go and say that, you know what, yeah, everyone's jobs are fine. Actually, AI is just an ally. It's going to work around you. It's going to make your job easier. Oh, you'll have a better work-life balance. That's not true, right? That it will replace jobs. That is the reality. And I think that's the thinking that needs to be applied, looking at, and you've listed roles that would be at risk. They are at risk. They will, in my opinion, be replaced within the next 5 years. Who knows what's going to happen in 10 years? The curve is exponential at the moment, which is why I've got a different view about the whole 5-year plan, because I think the speed at which AI is evolving and the speed at which it is automating, the implementation is a completely different story. And I think with health and social care in particular, we've been pretty poor in terms of adoption, and it does take a lot longer. However, having said that, look what's happening with all of the cuts and the need to drive efficiency, etc. That may change. That may very well change. And if that is the case, then I don't think that the sector is going to be as slow to adopt if those efficiencies can be provided.
I think it depends as well on what suppliers come to the market in health and social care. And I think, Jack, I remember when I very first met you, a couple of years ago, and I remember saying to you, actually, none of the care planning systems at the moment are using AI. It's going to take you to come in and you'll undercut all of them, and you'll save a load of people a bunch of time. And that's exactly what you've done. You've come in and you're really the only care planning system utilising AI to its full potential right now. But I think more and more will come into the market. And I think the ones that aren't using AI, as contracts come to an end, care providers will slowly leave them and move away from them. And I think we're already seeing people talking about, actually, now they're getting to grips with ChatGPT and they're seeing how much time that's saving them. Oh, actually, it's not as bad as I initially thought. Actually, what else is out there? I think when you were talking earlier, Devan, around actually not listening to the frontline voice, I wrote down around company culture and change management. And I think so many of those small, medium businesses don't have that. And I think, like I said right at the beginning, the managers are too busy operationally day-to-day firefighting that they don't have time to think about actually what is coming down the line in 5-10 years time and building that into their business plan. And I think one of you said earlier about the tick box exercise. I think our business plans in social care are very tick box exercise based on what the local authority want, what the CQC expect to see. They're not looking at actually where do we want to be in 5 years time in terms digitally, and what does that look like in terms of the AI landscape and the tech landscape. And I think, when it comes to change management, I think a lot of people don't listen to the frontline voice, or they appear to listen to the frontline voice, but then actually it goes back to the senior management team that implement the change that they wanted in the first place. And it is how we move that balance between actually what maybe your senior team want versus what actually operationally frontline managers, care workers, senior workers, what they actually need to do those jobs and to do them efficiently. And the only other thing I would just add, I made loads of notes, was about that I do think we need to retrain what work-life balance is. I think I've said it so many times that I think at the moment it's a myth that we all talk about, but nobody actually really has. I've not met one person that says they have a really good work-life balance. But actually, my argument to people that are worried about AI and tech coming in taking their job, actually, how great would it be if you could log off at 4 o'clock and go and spend the afternoon and the evening with your family doing something that you all love, and then you come back in at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock the next day and pick up where you left off, knowing that technology has done some of that legwork for you. Okay, I know that you've got like Bill Gates talking about in 10 years' time that everybody will be using AI and none of us will have a job. That's 10 years down the line. But right now, actually, why are we not utilizing the resources that we've got available to actually give us a better quality of life? Like I don't know. I think when I go to a new job, I set all these boundaries and I'm like, going to make sure I take a lunch break. I'm going to make sure I finish at 5. I'm going to do this, do that. And actually, most of those, like even just reflecting now, when I joined the company I'm with now, actually, I only do 2 of those things that I really set. I never take a lunch break, hardly ever. Work through it. Actually, if I knew that data could do something, in 10 minutes that allowed me to go and take a half-hour, 40-minute break, knowing that actually when I come back, I've just got to quickly ask it to analyze something and it can do it for me. Actually, I'll probably take that lunch break a lot quicker.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the remarkable thing is that despite that, you've still managed to keep a full head of hair, which Jack and I are both incredibly jealous of, Mark. But that aside, leaving that aside, what's your experience, both of you, in terms of AI writing care plans and the response to that?
No, I'm firmly against it at this moment in time. We spoke about this at UK Care Week, didn't we, Mark, on the panel? And although in principle it's great for logging information, I personally don't feel at this moment in time the tech is stable enough to curate a person-centered care plan perfectly around the person's needs with minimal intervention. And that's what my concern is. If we give that gateway now in its infancy, people will use it, and then they will use it because they feel it's bringing benefit and it's a great commodity to have. But then ultimately, will they then check the data on them? The amount of copy and paste care plans I've seen over the years in general. And then it's also, is the AI that's curating this recognized as a medical device? So is it certified to be able to interpret this data? And personally, unless it's been signed off by a clinical safety officer, I wouldn't recommend anyone looking at that going, let's use it. But that's just my opinion. It is something, I'll be honest, that we are looking at in the future when it's a bit safer and we can turn around and go, this is how we feel that it should work. Because like yourself, our AI is completely in-house. It's not open AI, it's not chat, because you can control the weights, the parameters, and it's safer, it's lesser margin of error. And like you, we had them technical hurdles at the beginning. It's like, well, it's ours, it takes so long. And as you was exactly right, over time it just gets easier because you know what you're doing, your AI grows, and over the years technology advances as well, so it helps you train them modules. But there's no health and social care planning data set which has been signed off by a regulator where they would say this would be a standard that you can operate on. And I kind of feel that with 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7, of these providers on the market, you're going to have a different standard of care planning template again. And we're just creating, in my opinion, another potential obstacle in the future. I mean, it's great. I love it about saving like time and getting things right. But realistically, until there's an agreed care plan standard that can be used potentially nationally, I personally feel it's a very big obstacle to try and tackle. And anything that we would use, that we would market within our product, we would clearly identify that is an experimental feature, and we strongly recommend that you check the accuracy of the data that goes into it, because it's not just about training the AI to pull data from here and there. It also depends on how someone phrases a question. So depending on how they ask the question depends on the response that they could get and that outcome. And where we have a massive sector with multiple people who speak different languages, they have different interpretations, it is quite difficult at this moment in time for people to actually curate a standard care plan in writing, or using text to speech, speech to text. And that is one of my concerns. I see the place for it. I genuinely do. but not now. Is my honest opinion, and that's just based on the fact of where we're at. That once again, 6 months time, someone could come out with an absolute banger that wipes the floor with everything, and my perception will change. But it's just based on what I see available at the moment, and hearing the nuances of people who are using some form of AI to try and get it right. I think it would be a great one if someone can pull it out the bag. I do think that would be a market leading way of working, if I'm honest with you. But it's just how, because will it be accepted?
Yeah,
I'm not. The acceptance isn't the issue. Well, when you say acceptance, the question is accepted by who? The several other problems. I think you guys and we've got our own closed source AI, right? That works. Now the problem that you have is what you'll have is a lot of people that will be plugging these things into OpenAI platforms, right? That will happen because what you will have is people trying to find a quick, cheap way in, and then you have a huge problem. That's one of my concerns. I think the copy and pasting is going to be a problem, even if you, no matter what you say there, that it's experimental, etc., and it's finding a way, and it is one of the things we're working on in terms of how to actually get that information validated and have the human in the loop, but it's the processes around that, because like you two, I've also seen people just copy and paste care plans. And the way in which what you could do with generative AI is unfortunately problematic because it writes nonsense pretty beautifully. And and you know, like it does, doesn't it? It can take garbage and you know just put the most, and then there's all of the hallucinations that take place as well. So I think there is lots of work to be done there. But what would be the acceptance criteria? What do you both think?
My personal opinion is it's got to be accepted and recognised by the regulator as a safe approach. That's an acceptance factor, because people don't like to step outside of the boundaries in social care because it risks a significant penalty and it's playing with people's health and well-being. I don't think it's too much of getting staff to use it, because once they see the benefits of it, they will use that happily because it will save them hours of task. I think mainly it's about how it's transcribed in. So, for example, if we've got an AI listening in the room to two people talking, how it knows who's saying what, because all of these care plans should be wrote in the first person, you know, essentially. So it should be very person specific. So if you have two people talking at the AI, does it know when to break? Does it know if I'm Ann Jones and I'm the service user, that when I say I would like to, it will transcribe that? And if I'm Jack, the care manager, talking, it knows I'm Jack. Now, we know that is possible because looking at devices like Alexa, where they can check through like voice recognition patterns, and obviously looking at who you are to determine if you are the right person, sort of like authentication. But once again, you might be dealing with, say, 5 or 6 people in a multidisciplinary meeting. So does the AI have the functionality to be able to pick up 5 or 6 different voices and transcribe who said what when? And how effective will that data be? And the last part is, who's the arbiter? Who determines whether that data set is sound and solid, ready to be used for digital care planning? I know at the moment there's a lot of talk about organizations wanting to see like the weighting that goes into AI training, like the modules that are being used. There's a lot of cry at the moment for people wanting to know how the AI is essentially built to make these decisions. And as a commercial business, we won't release that information. You know, no business is going to, because that's how you've built your business. You know why? So this is where there's got to be some form of ground. I personally believe this is the way I think we could really desensitize AI. There needs to be a recognizable repository where AI or modules can be submitted to independently to be verified as safe for organizations to use, and then they get stamped and accredited. And then once they've got a health and social care flag on them, they're ready for adoption, kind of like how we have all of the assured suppliers lists and so forth. That might be a way forward, but personally, I'm like you. I'm sure you wouldn't want to be sending your IP to,
We're not going to be sending our IP, Jack.
That's what I mean. No one's going to.
The concern about that is by the time you have one of those agencies being set up and getting the right people, I mean, that's just, when's that ever going to happen? The ability to discern, even though you've got multiple speakers in the room, is that we can do that. The one way in which we can deal with the tonal stuff, but which is experimental at this point in time, is using vocal biomarkers, right? I think if you combine those two, then you have something that is pretty special and starts to tick a lot of boxes. My concern about someone and somebody, besides the time it takes to do that, is where's the expertise to do it? The people, we are, I don't think there's that many of us that have the same, that have got a closed loop systems, right? So what you're talking about is two of us here out of probably what, half a dozen at most, if that. I don't even think there's half a dozen, right? We're not going to get, well, firstly, we'd never be allowed to be there because of the obvious conflict of interest.
Exactly.
So who's going to do it?
That's the problem. And I'm not sure if you've noticed throughout social care, but you get a lot of people talking about things that they're not actually qualified to do in a lot of capacities. And I find that quite difficult at times, because I've had people sit in roles trying to tell me about AI and tech, but they've got no tech background and software creation, but they're trying to tell us as a business how we should move forward with software development. And sometimes you kind of feel like it's the blind leading the blind. If I'm honest, I'm not sure. It's the same with any tech implementation. There's a lot of documentation out there, but do I have the time to go through it? Well, yes, if I should do, if I want to implement it. But then what happens if I become stuck? I'll go and ask someone. They'll say, I'm not sure. They'll put me in a waiting queue. I'll get an email back in 28 days or something like that from someone saying, here's a link. If you don't like it, follow me. And then email me back. I'll give you some. And by the time you get the answer, you've been passed around by about 4 or 5 different people. It needs to be more streamlined. Realistically, there should be some form of digital tech hub for social care that's got qualified individuals who work in, like, are qualified in AI, are qualified in cyber security, who understand these points. So when we look at, for instance, cyber essentials, and we have to get that done as a baseline, okay, so we know that there's something out there. We know there's people that can assess cyber essentials. So why is there not a social care body that can assess the equivalent of cyber security for digital systems for social care, where you just send it to them and you get a stamp from them essentially to say this meets that criteria? Now, I don't know if you've applied for certain assured suppliers lists and so forth, but one of the things we see on this is it means you meet some forms of standard, but some of the feedback you hear from customers, it doesn't mean operability. So it means that someone can meet a baseline, but it doesn't meet their working function. And I feel we still need to sort that out. A system is either fit for purpose or it's not. It can't sit on the market being an assured supplier when it's not fully there and meeting everyone's needs. But these lists change and the requirements change, and we just need people that are competent to move with the tech to assess them and sign them off.
Yeah, we have going through that process, and I think for me one of the issues, and you mentioned the cyber essentials, well, why do you still have to get it if you've got your ISO? And I use that as an example, Jack, because if you go into, well, fortunately at this point in time, there is an international standards, right? But are we going to be behind the curve again? If you look at what's happening, and if you look at what happens in the US and China, etc., right? I mean, they are way ahead with a lot of these things. There's a lot of products there that I question in terms of the ethical use of. That there's applications now out there for dementia, which is really interesting stuff in terms of being able to recreate people. They have their own arguments for it, right? But incredibly advanced stuff. Whether or not those are appropriate, they have been developed and are out there because of the support that's given, because we don't have as many restrictions they don't have as many restrictions. Now, what we're doing is trying to put all of these restrictions into place and have all of these bodies formed, which is why we have the problem with legacy tech. And that's why you do the stuff that you do, and I'm doing the stuff that I do, right? But that's not going to benefit anyone if we continue to look at how to put the regulations and the restrictions in place before we allowed anyone to start developing it. It's going to put people off. And all we're doing is, we're protecting a legacy past that we know doesn't work, right? The legacy tech does not work. And we are doing more and more to protect that past as opposed to innovating in order for us to actually improve care at scale and, to take the lead again. Britain exported the teaching hospital, right? It's a classic example. And then there's just been this slow decline in terms of innovations that have been exported from this country. And it's not benefiting health and social care at all.
But I think, Jack, you spoke about that digital hub. I think we need like an innovation hub that's looking at, where are we going in social care? Because the tech right now is supporting an aging population. But actually, what are we going to do when all these people that use tech right now every day of their lives move into these care services that aren't tech enabled, tech friendly? You spoke about the care plans. I'd love to live in a world where we don't have a bloody care plan unless somebody lacks capacity. Why are we not going into people's homes every day or into the care service and saying, people, what do you want? Why are we not just having those human conversations? And I manage reablement services, and I look at my care plans now compared to the care plans I had when I managed an elderly service, compared to a learning disability service. And it's just goal focused. Actually, these are what you want to achieve, these 3 goals, while you're in our service for 6 weeks. Then the carers determine how you're going to do that with the person alongside therapy staff. But it's ever changing because the people are meeting their goals. And as they meet those goals, those ones close and new ones start within that 6-week period. I don't understand why we don't do that with everybody that has capacity, as opposed to us writing down like a Bible. This is exactly how, she likes to use an electric toothbrush and wash her face. And what happens if she wants to use a manual toothbrush tomorrow, or the care plan says it's an electric because, she can't go to the shop? How do you know she's not going to regain independence with mobility because, healthcare is advancing so much quicker, and tablets, and medication and bits and pieces? I think we almost need this is what is the potential, utilising what's happening in other sectors and how we evolve within social care. I'd hate to have a care plan that really has my whole life history in it and everything that I can and can't do. I'd much rather somebody came into me every day and said, how are you feeling today? What do you want to do? Most of the time I'd be like, I'll just leave me, I'll lay in bed. But actually tomorrow I might want to get up and go, Sainsbury's or whatever it is that I want to do. But I feel like at the moment we're very tick box, in a box focused, because that's how we're regulated and that's kind of what we're told to do.
I agree.
And that just kills the argument. Thanks. That just brilliantly kills the argument for going on that route of the whole standardization process that you would need to implement in order for AI to work. Because if you did that, then you were taking away the individuality that you were talking about. So we take 2 years to set that up, finally agree on a set of standards, etc. But it goes against the grain, completely against the grain. I'm completely with you on this one, Mark, right? So what we've done, wasted 2 years of time that could have been spent on innovating and looking at how to actually address the problem you've identified, as opposed to going and standardize something that we're saying we shouldn't do in the first place, in order to do what? Put forward a set of ethical and structural guidelines for an artificial intelligence system to write a care plan, and then go and tell the person that you were talking about, oh, I'm sorry, this is the way we have to do it because this is what our body said you need to do. So I really don't care how you want to do this care plan. This is how it's going to be done. This is the format, which is what is an inevitability if you go down that route of structuring it and regulating it to that extent, Jack.
Yeah, it's not very personal. Person-centered care, is it? If you're making everyone follow a mold, essentially. And there's got to be some form of structure, but sometimes we put too much structure in and worry too much about that structure that we forget the person at hand. Yes. And that's what happens. We've got lots of food for thought. We're out of time now, guys. That's gone quick. But no, that's it's been an amazing podcast. I think there's definitely been lots of food for thought, especially around AI implementation and the challenges. And I'm not sure if you guys have got any closing points. I've really enjoyed myself. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Devan. And I'll give a quick shout out to your company and what you do, what your plans are, just so everyone can hear it again, because it sounds amazing.
It's been absolutely brilliant. I have managed to not talk much about the company, but thank you for giving me the opportunity. All I would like to say is that June 12th, that's when our launch takes place. I'm not going to call it a launch, I'm going to call it a jailbreak, given the conversation we've just had, guys. Right? It is a jailbreak for the carers who never gave up, the leaders who refused to compromise, and Mark, for the residents who deserve person-centered care. So 12th of June, that's when we're going to launch our stuff.
Excellent. Well, make sure all of our listeners check in on the 12th of June with Devan and look out for that exciting jailbreak. That sounds pretty cool. But no, thank you very much for coming and joining myself and Mark. Mark, any closing statements?
No, just echoing what you've just said, Jack. Thank you, Devan, for coming on. And I think it's been an interesting conversation. It's definitely even got me thinking about bits and pieces. And as ever, I've written many notes to take away and continue that future thinking.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Oh no, thank you, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Can't believe the time's gone that quickly. Thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. We'll catch up with you maybe in a year, and then we'll hear how the 12th of June went. Sounds good. Well, thank you for joining, everyone. Have a lovely weekend.
Take care, guys.
See you later. Thank you.